All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into a pretty radical new vision for how we live, specifically in the suburbs. And it all begins with a problem that, let's be honest, a lot of us are feeling: the housing crisis.
So let's start in Delaware. Get this, a full 50% of renters there are what's called cost-burdened. That means half of all the people renting are paying more than the recommended 30% of their income just for rent. And as you can imagine, that leaves very little room for anything else. We're talking food, healthcare, you name it.
So that's the grim reality. But what if? What if we could flip that crisis into an opportunity? This one single question is really at the heart of an innovative project trying to do exactly that. Okay, let's dive into this.
To really get our heads around the solution they're proposing, we first have to understand just how big the problem is. And to do that, we're going to look at some numbers from the 2023 Delaware Statewide Housing Needs Assessment.
And right away, the report lays bare some pretty stark inequities. For example, while 81% of white households in Delaware own their homes, that number just plummets to 51% for black households and 52% for Hispanic households. And that's not just a small gap, right? That is a massive chasm when it comes to the opportunity to build wealth.
Okay, now this is where things get really interesting. You can see this huge mismatch between what people are earning and what homes actually cost. Think about it. 3/4 of everyone renting in Delaware can only afford the cheapest 20% of homes on the market. Meanwhile, the top quarter of renters can afford 80% of them. That's a massive, massive barrier to entry.
And you know, this isn't just a Delaware thing. Not by a long shot. If we zoom way out, the UN Habitat Program gives us a truly staggering number. Over 1.1 billion people around the world are living in slums or informal settlements. This is a global crisis, and it's pretty clear that the old ways of thinking just aren't going to cut it.
Right, so a crisis this big, it absolutely demands a new vision, which is where this project called One Lake Drive comes in. It's a really radical new vision, and it actually started from a very personal story. So after a fire tragically destroyed his family's home, the founder, Mudassar Malik, he wasn't just driven to rebuild. He was inspired to ask some much bigger questions, to envision something more, a real sanctuary, one that's rooted in resilience and community and healing.
And his entire project is framed by these three really big questions. They're trying to connect the dots between the wisdom in ancient spiritual texts, the very modern challenges of climate change, and, of course, the urgent, practical need for better housing.
So to tackle that first question, the one about shared wisdom, the project actually developed this really unique curriculum. The whole idea is to pull out these universal, practical life skills that you can find across the world's great spiritual traditions.
And it's called the 7 Skills of Scripture. Now, this is key. It's not about any single religion. It's really a framework for living that pulls together practices like mindfulness, knowing where your food comes from, ethical reasoning, and it draws these from shared principles you can find in texts like the Bible, the Quran, and the Gita.
Okay, so once you have this ethical framework, this how to live guide, the next big challenge is, well, where do you live? How do you actually design the physical sanctuary itself? A new kind of neighborhood, built from the ground up for resilience.
And this chart, wow, it really shows you the difference in thinking here. On one side, you've got your conventional home. But the One Lake Drive model, it uses these modular, stackable units that are way more affordable, way more climate resilient, and way more energy efficient. And just look at that density number, up to 256 units per acre. I mean, that is a complete reimagining of what a suburb can be.
So the prototype itself, it's really designed less like a building and more like a whole living ecosystem. Just imagine this, a layout that's optimized for solar power, a checkerboard stacking design that gives every single home its own terrace or garden. The village is designed to harvest its own rainwater, recycle its gray water, and really bring people together in shared spaces like community kitchens and a central amphitheater. Okay, and here's where things get really fascinating and maybe a little sci-fi. There's this tech layer called the Sacred AI platform. So the idea is to train an AI on these ancient sacred texts, but not just to find words. The goal is to find shared ethical principles. It's a really ambitious attempt to build a tool that can actually support the community's well-being by bridging that gap between ancient wisdom and the absolute cutting edge of technology. Now, it's really important to understand that this isn't just a plan for one little acre in Delaware. No way. The entire model, from the buildings to the AI, it's all designed to be scaled up from a local prototype into a global solution.
And you know what? This idea is already starting to get some real political traction. The concept even got a specific shout-out, an endorsement, in the 2025 Delaware Democratic Party platform as a model for future-focused, climate-resilient development.
So the big question is, how does this actually grow? Well, the plan is to go from this initial prototype in Delaware to a full-on franchise model. This means other communities, other developers, anywhere in the world could license the entire sanctuary suburb blueprint and build one themselves. All right, so what's it going to take to get this off the ground? The very first step is a $7 million seed investment. That initial money is the key ingredient, right? It's what's needed to buy the land and actually build the first flagship village in Delaware. That's the proof of concept that could really kickstart this whole thing globally. And the long-term goal here is, well, it's incredibly ambitious. The aim is to scale this thing globally through that franchise model, and they're projecting a valuation of over $700 million within just 7 years. But it's important to see that number as more than just profit. A valuation that high would mean this model has become a really powerful, self-sustaining solution to the housing crisis, but on a massive global scale. So when you boil it all down, this whole project is really asking us to think about not just how we build our homes, but how we build our future. It leaves us with this really provocative thought from the founder. As AI gets woven into every part of our lives, who's going to be responsible for teaching it not just facts and data, but real wisdom? And it suggests that maybe, just maybe, the answers we need for tomorrow are hiding in the timeless lessons from our past.